How are you, folks? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. We had Ron DeSantis being interviewed by Tucker Carlson at the Blaze Summit, and Ron DeSantis is running behind Trump in the Republican primary polling. He is a favorite among people who think that he is Trump without the baggage, Trump with more political skill, Trump, but more focused. And I think there is some truth to that. And so I understand why people like him. But for me personally, my issue with DeSantis is foreign policy. I don't really trust him on foreign policy. And in this interview with Tucker Carlson, he gave a really rambling, in circle sort of response, talking about the war in Ukraine that I thought was frankly quite ridiculous. And so his interview, I don't really care about the domestic stuff because we know he's fairly good on that. It's this answer on foreign policy that is interesting. So I want to play his answer. It's very long, about 7 minutes, and I'm going to stop it several times because there's so many things he says where you kind of go, what exactly are you trying to say? And it's really, in my opinion, quite fascinating. But before I play that, I want to play one clip that he said earlier where he talks about making the hard choices and going against your donors, which is ironic because just a few minutes later, when it comes to the question of Ukraine, he just starts to ramble and, again, talk in circles. So I thought that was kind of funny. So first, listen to this first clip where he says, when you're in office, you make tough choices and the donors be damned. You got to do what's right. Here's what he says.
It is a critical issue, and it's one I'm happy to have done. And oh, by the way, this is an issue where I had a lot of supporters who were averse to me on this. Donors saying they didn't want to support me if I stood for life. It's been written about how I lost a lot of really big supporters. Some of them just aren't pro-life. Some of them think it's a political liability. And at the end of the day, you get into office to be able to do what's right. And you've got to stand on principle, and you've got to say, why am I here? If you're here to contort yourself into a pretzel, to try to not have to take on big issues, to take the political road that's easier traveled, then you're not somebody that's dependable. So we stood up, we did what was right. Yeah, we lost some support as a result of that, but if I had a chance to do it again, I'd do it every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
So he says that, don't twist yourself into a pretzel, just stand by what you believe, make the hard decisions. He says this, and then he has this answer on foreign policy, which goes opposite to what he just said. So let's start this video. Again, I'm going to stop it several times because there's so many interesting things that he says that need to be broken down. So let's start.
Traditional American values.
Amen. So, as president, you'd be in charge pretty much single-handedly of America's foreign policy. So with that in mind, I have to ask you about Ukraine. So in the spring, you described the war in Ukraine as a, quote, territorial dispute. You issued a statement saying it was a territorial dispute that was not central to America's national interest. There was an outcry over this, and then pretty soon after you seemed to change your view and describe Putin as a war criminal and say that it was central to America's foreign policy. Why did you change, and where are you now?
So the last part I did not say. I served in Iraq during the Iraq campaign in Fallujah.
That's true. You didn't say the last part.
I was attached to U.S. Navy SEAL Team 1. And remember, it started on what WMD. Then we had Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Then it was create a democracy. Then it was that. And so the lesson that I learned from there is if you're going to commit to do military, whether it's aid or whether it's troops, you need to have a concrete idea of what you're trying to achieve. And so from the time I got out of the sandbox and landed back in the United States 15 years ago until the present, I've always felt that. And so my critique of the DC foreign policy elite is that they are doing a blank check policy without telling us when we will have achieved our objective.
So let me just stop right there. He is right again where he never said that Ukraine was vital to American interests. So I do think he's correct on that, correcting Tucker. But one thing I found interesting was he didn't say we shouldn't fight this war for any sort of ethical reason, any moral reason. His real issue here, it seems, is he just wants a timeline. So we can go kill people, no problem, but just got to be let's be clear about how many people we're going to kill. What is our objective in killing them, and how so we can really nail down when that objective is completed, so we can leave. So it's not a moral or ethical thing. He's not talking about the underlying cause of why the Ukraine war started. He just wants a timeline. He wants clearly defined goals, which are good. But again, aren't you curious as to why this war started, how it happened, so that in the future we can prevent things like this from happening again? So he never really talks about that. And of course, he mentions being serving in Iraq and being attached to the Navy SEALs, and we know why people say that. You mentioned the Navy SEALs, and I was attached to them. I think he was a JAG lawyer. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that. I think he was a lawyer. So let's not pretend like he was jumping out of helicopters shooting bad guys. That's not what he was doing there. But of course, he's a politician, so he has to mention I was attached to the Navy SEAL Team 1. So whatever.
And I believe that today, and I believe that then. Now, because you dissent from the DC foreign policy elite, they then try to smear you and say, oh, you must be for Putin. I've always thought Putin's a bad guy. I still think he's a bad guy. But that's a separate question for a leader who's got to look at the world in very clear-eyed glasses. You know that it's not all peaches and cream out there. And you have to make a judgment about what's in America's national interest. And so that's the position that I believe. And I also believe that I wish the DC elites cared as much about our border as they do about the Ukraine-Russia border. Because there's people pouring into this country. We have people dying from fentanyl overdose. The cartels are running the show. And what I've said is this is something on day one. Declare a national emergency, mobilize all resources, including the military, stop the invasion, yes, build the wall, but most importantly, authorize the Border Patrol, authorize our military to deal with the cartels. If they're breaking into our country, bringing product, if I'm in charge, that's going to be the last thing they do because they're going to end up stone cold dead.
Amen.
So he talks about the DC elite. I think he understands that many of us are concerned that he's going to bend to the military-industrial complex and the neocons. So several times there he mentions going against the DC elite. And again, I think that's purely an attempt to make him seem like he's challenging them. But you notice the end there, he starts talking about the border. This question was about Ukraine. He says, Putin's a bad guy. Okay, great. We don't want to overcommit and do things that aren't in our national interest. But then he talks about the border. He doesn't talk about how he's going to deal with Ukraine, and he's avoiding it again. And that's my problem.
So what, if we can just go back.
Like Tucker saying, let's go back.
Great critique.
Ukraine.
So what is the goal, do you think, in Ukraine? When do we know we've achieved it?
They will not define it. And
what do you think it should be?
I think the goal should be to have a sustainable peace in Europe. Okay?
How?
We don't want there to be war breaking out. There have been
Explain
a
how
lot
you
of
do
people
that.
that have been killed, displaced. It's a horrible thing. But you have to provide a articulation of where you're going to go to get there. And my fear is right now is they're basically doing an open-ended conflict. This is going to be a multi-year quagmire. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to die, and there's not going to be much fast change on the ground. And the dispute at this point, or the war at this point, is not whether Ukraine's government is going to fall. They're fighting over territory on the far eastern part of the country between Russia and Ukraine. And that's kind of where this is at. So the question is, okay, how do you get that to where we can stop this? And also, from our national interest, this is humiliating for our country that we're running out of ammunition. They're now trying to mobilize troops, U.S. troops, to go to Europe when we have a major threat in the Indo-Pacific, the Chinese Communist Party, who they're basically given a free pass to. As president, I would prioritize the threats to our national security. The top threat to this country is China. It's China's ambitions, it's China's industrial capacity, it's the CCP's ability to pollute our culture, impact our universities. Incidentally, in Florida, we got rid of the Confucius Institutes that they put in universities. We cracked down on them being able to do research dollars to our universities, and we banned any purchase of land by the CCP in the state of Florida.
So he said a whole lot there. He says the question is, how do we bring about a peace to Ukraine and Europe? But it's open-ended. He doesn't answer it. So what, again, because Tucker was trying to give him to say, what are you going to do? Well, we need a sustainable peace. Well, no crap. We all know that. But how do you do that? Again, wouldn't answer it. And then he deflects to China and starts talking about the CCP. And I will say this, actually, when it comes to, again, domestic things here. He's talking about the Chinese government operating within the United States, buying up land. On that issue, I actually agree. The United States government should not be buying land in China and vice versa. I believe in things being reciprocal. So if the United States is going to invite hundreds of thousands, well, maybe not that many, but certainly a lot of Chinese students come to our universities, go to our study in our labs and do research, that gives them a lot of access to the United States, which I don't believe the Chinese government gives to us. So I'm all about things being fair. We shouldn't be encroaching on the Chinese culture and their country and vice versa. But on that case, I will say the United States has been very inviting to the Chinese to come here. We have a lot of naturalized citizens from China here. So we've been pretty hospitable. And that hasn't been reciprocated, I don't think, nearly enough. And if the Chinese government wants to buy land in our country, that should be a non-starter. Like, no, you can't do that, and we shouldn't be doing it in China either. But again, a little bit hostile toward China, old Ron DeSantis, and he's about to say something that I thought was absolutely ridiculous, and here is coming up.
So given
here's
that
the thing, though. You have to do what's based on our interests. You can't subcontract out our interests to a foreign leader. You can't want it to go on because it'll be good for defense contractors or, globalist investors. It's all about what's in our interests. And I think we're basically in a situation with our foreign policy. We're providing a blanket security to Europe. They're not paying their fair share. And we're not doing what we need to do to project power in the Pacific. At the end of the day, the CCP respects hard power. And I'm concerned that because a strong America can deter
Here it comes.
Conflict, I think a weak America may be on the path to inviting conflict with China. And if we continue to be weak abroad and allow our culture to deteriorate here at home, we can have a situation where our kids or grandkids are studying, memorizing 37 different pronouns in Mandarin, and we can't have that. So we've got to do better as a country. We need to reverse the decline of this country because it is happening very, very quickly.
So you inherit this.
We're going to have a situation where our children or grandchildren will be learning 37 different pronouns in Mandarin. Now, that was a planned comment there. That wasn't off the top of his head. He was looking for a clap break, which never came, and he sort of went, and then he continued. What the heck does that mean? What kind of nonsense is that? That is so low. I hate people doing that kind of thing. If we don't have a foreign policy, we project power up here, we're going to speak in German or we're going to speak in Russian, and now it's Mandarin. It's so beneath Ron DeSantis to say that. That's so stupid. China might be a growing power. Perhaps one day maybe they will be the strongest country on this planet. But no American is going to be speaking Mandarin 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or 50 years from now. We have the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. We are impenetrable from other countries. We're fine. We might lose our grasp on world power. We may not be the hegemon anymore. Maybe that will be China. But our lives, our livelihood is not threatened by China, and our kids will not be speaking Mandarin. So I really thought that comment from Ron DeSantis was absolutely ridiculous.
Mess a year and a half from now, say, and let's just say it's static, it's where it is right now. What do you do about it? Like, how do you act?
One, Europe needs to do more. This is their backyard. We can't.
That's
We
Trump's
have NATO
line.
countries that don't produce support for their own defenses, and we're supposed to do it, and we're taking away weapons and ammo that could go to respond to contingencies overseas. So we would do more in terms of the Pacific, and the goal should be to bring it to a conclusion. You bring it to a conclusion in a way that's a sustainable peace and that doesn't reward aggression, and you have to be able to use different levers that you have. I mean, for example, one of the leverages I would use vis-a-vis Russia is I would do our own energy exploration and send it over to Europe so they don't have to rely on Putin. I
It's
would
good for us,
stop
money-wise.
giving Iran a free pass like Biden is because they're funding Russia. So we have some ability to use this, but the goal should be we cannot have a quagmire that goes on for years and years. And seeing Biden put those troops there, I can tell you, we cannot have American troops in Ukraine. That is a total non-starter.
So
And there's Ron DeSantis, and three last comments on what he said here. The first thing about the United States is being weak in the Pacific, and we got to project power. We're already doing that. We just added several new bases on the northern parts of the Philippines, across from Taiwan. We are putting a NATO office in Japan. We're already projecting a lot of power over there, so I'm not sure how much more power he thinks we need to project. So I don't quite understand that. Second, he says that we need to end this conflict in Ukraine in a way that does not award aggression. Now think about that. In a way that does not reward aggression. Well, Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine. If we have a ceasefire right now and the war ends, Russia gains 20% of Ukraine. Is that rewarding aggression? So how does he plan to stop this war without rewarding aggression? Unless he means that Russia needs to completely be driven from Ukraine. So again, I don't know what he's actually going to do to stop the war. It's not clear. Again, this long clip here, he goes on and weaving in and out, talking about the border for some reason, going on talking about China. China's going to take over the United States. He's everywhere. And he's not clear. And in the last part, he talks about giving our own oil to Europe. That's actually happening right now. But the problem is we have to ship it over there, obviously. It doesn't go through pipelines. It has to go through on boats. And we sell to the Europeans at a much higher rate. So it's good for our interest to sell Europe energy, but it's really going to cost the Europeans a lot. They were much, much better off getting their energy from Russia. It was much cheaper. And it is that foreign policy decision is hurting Europe a lot more than anyone else. It's not really hurting us. And that's what blows my mind. The Europeans are the ones. He's saying the Europeans got to do more. They're the ones paying the most right now because of their energy costs skyrocketing, and Germany is now deindustrializing. So we can demand Europe does do more, but at the same time, they're the one. They're feeling the brunt of this separation from Russia. Not we, the United States. We're actually making money off it by selling the Europeans oil. So. We're already doing it, and that is not going to deter Russia at this point. Russia is setting up deals with the rest of the world, the global south, and this year their economy is projected to actually be a positive. So this whole idea that without the West and Europe that Russia would just collapse and turn to nothing hasn't come true. All those predictions were wrong. The situation is much more complicated, and being attached to the West doesn't have the importance it used to have. We're strong, United States, we're strong, Europe, collectively, but it's not 30 years ago. There's more people out there, and Russia seemingly will do just fine without us. So I'm not sure we can squeeze Russia through energy. And again, the only people that get gain from that is us, and the Europeans are just struggling still with all these high energy costs. So that was Ron DeSantis's long-winded answer that weaved in and out. It did seem like he contorted himself into a pretzel, despite the fact earlier you said you shouldn't do that. You should be straightforward, speak truth to power, do the right thing, even if you lose donors and even if you lose support. Well, apparently when it comes to foreign policy, Ron DeSantis will not quite give you a straight answer. So I would love to get a straight answer from him because, again, the only thing that I question him on is the foreign policy issue. And once again, I'm sitting here going, I'm still questioning it because you're not telling me anything. Great on the border, great as a governor. As president, I don't know. That's why I'm still a Trump guy. Well, that's it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.